Today's piece is going to be more of a rescue. Here's the story. My local furniture friend Sabina sent me a listing for a Lane Brutalist nightstand set that had been painted. It was like, I don't know, 90, 95 bucks. And so I was like, oh my gosh, she went up and she got it. I was like, oh no, I'm so jealous because I've always wanted to work on a Brutalist set. And so she got it home, started stripping it, and there is so much damage underneath it. And so she's like, well, don't be jealous because it's terrible. And so she messages me, and she's got the skills, but she works full time. And according to her, she doesn't have the time or the patience to work on it. So she's like, do you want it? And I was like, yes. So I drove up, paid her what she paid, picked him up, and I'm going to give him a go. She's so funny. I recorded our exchange. I was going to cut it up, but it was so funny, I thought I would just put it in here. She's trying to recreate, counting down for me, working on my content. So here it is.
Take it out.
You're going to take it all the way?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Oh, you're committed.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1.
Okay. You're awesome.
High five.
Okay. Okay, now you gotta turn around. And okay, there she is. Come here. Okay. There you go. She only started stripping one, and there was a lot of damage. So I am a little concerned of what's under them, but I figure if I can't get it all to wood, they will look beautiful painted, but I'm really gonna try to get them to wood. So let me show you what they look like.
So here they are. I do love that we have a matching pair. So that's really great. You can see that she started stripping the top and the sides and one of the doors. Now that door is pretty rough. There's a lot of damage underneath there. Now, we don't know what kind of paint the person used. She doesn't think there's any kind of primer on it. It's just simply gray paint. Thankfully, they didn't paint the interior. So that part is really good. I think it's freshly painted, but it's pretty bad. So I'm just going to have to work on getting as much of this off as I can. I'm a little concerned with the amount of damage on each corner. I'm going to have to recreate with some wood putty, but I think they're pretty valuable. What I did is I looked them up. Now, obviously, Etsy is a great place to look because that's something that I could actually list them on. Cherish and First Dibs is really expensive, but I found them for $1,500 for one nightstand. Now that was refinished in really good condition. So I'm just going to start stripping off the paint and see what's underneath it. I'm using Smart Strip Advance. This is by Dumont, and it's a great non-toxic stripper. You don't have to wear a respirator with it. I like to let it set about an hour or two and see, and then do a test spot. You can see I wasn't sure which way the grain was going, so I just had to scrape it, and then I realized that the grain was going the opposite direction. So you always want to try to scrape in the direction of the grain, because otherwise you'll get a pattern, or you'll get a scrape going opposite against the grain, which you don't want. But so many nooks and crannies on this piece. I had to use my pocket scraper. I had to use my carbide scraper. I had to use all kinds of things. You can see I'm using some acetone and some 2-aught or 00 steel wool. That helps kind of get some more of that residue off. So honestly, stripping is not hard. It's just tedious. So I kind of got to the point where I had to just do one door at a time because it's so exhausting. But you'll see I'm going to go through this process and just one little bit at a time, and it'll eventually come off.
Spent all afternoon stripping the nightstands, and now I see why Sabina didn't want them. I am so tired and they look terrible. Let me show you. The case is actually stripped pretty good. They don't look too bad. Obviously, I had some area that I had some additional veneer that I lost in the process. So it's the doors that are the problem. You know, when you're stripping, the easiest would be just to come straight down with my scraper. But the problem is you want to go with the grain, and the grain is going horizontally, even in these little areas. So it's real difficult to get my scraper in here going this direction. And it just makes it really difficult to strip. So, oh gosh, I don't know. I'm gonna have to do another round, get some more acetone. This one looks a little bit better. And then this is the one that Sabina started with that has all the damage. As far as damage wise, this is the one that has the most damage. Everything else is okay. All the other drawers or doors, but I gotta get into all these little nooks and crannies and get all this paint off. Yikes. So much work.
I got some Jasco paint remover that comes in a spray. I'm trying to get it into those little crevices to see if I can get a little bit more off of those doors that had the really stubborn paint. I'm using a soft wire brush. It's like a brass brush. It's not going to harm the wood, but it helps get into those crevices a little bit better. I'll do the same process as the other stripper, remove it first, and then I'll come back with paper towels, acetone, 2/0 steel wool, and try to get as much of that paint off as possible. I really want to get off as much as possible now and not try to sand it off. It's much easier to get off with your paint remover and with acetone instead of trying to just get it off with your sandpaper. You can see I had to even go in with some little dental tools just to get into those crevices. It was literally stuck in the seam, so I had to drag it out and try to get as much out as I could. Once that's dried out, I'm ready to start sanding. I'm going to start at 80 grit. You can see I'm using my Festool, but I'm an impatient sander. And so I just grab my hand sanding block and I'm using that because it goes really fast. So I grab the 80, use my sanding sponge, then I'll go up to 120 and I'll stop at 180. That's why I like to get off as much as I can during the stripping process because the sanding goes so fast when I do. You can see there was paint stuck in the little particle board that was on the base. And so I had to use my scraper and then I'm trying to use my sander to get all of that little bit of paint out. Now here's the damage that was on that one door. I'm going to fill in the damage on this door. I don't think I'll be able to fix it per se, but I'm going to at least fill it and see what it looks like. Don't know if I can fill it and then blend it, but I at least need to fill it in. I'm using Mohawk's epoxy. It's a 2-part system, and you just knead it together, and then you can apply it to the area that needs to be fixed. This is in the color Walnut. I like to use epoxy for any areas that are like structural repairs. So you'll see throughout the video, I have several corners that have to be recreated. So any kind of corners or anything like that, I like to use the epoxy because it's really strong for structural areas. I have a multi-tool that I've used for other things, and this is a cutter. And you can take the blade off and you can exchange it with a little sanding head. I'm going to use this to try to get into some of those finer areas that are hard to reach with my sanding tools. I thought it worked really well, especially on the flat areas. You can see that it's very difficult to get a sanding tool into those crevices because of the direction of the wood grain. But this multi-tool worked pretty good. Now I'm ready to strip the back of the doors. They kind of got all messed up in the stripping process, so I decided I just need to go ahead and strip them as well. Here's another corner that I'm going to use the wood epoxy on. Again, it's really good for structural repairs. These corners always get messed up. So in very little places, I always find myself having to recreate a corner. So I'm just going to form it, put some painter's tape over it, then I'll clamp it up with some wood pieces, and that will really help form that corner at a nice 90-degree angle. Once it's dried, I can remove the tape, and then I'm going to start forming it with my sandpaper. And I'm just trying to blend it into the surrounding wood, make sure that it's nice and level. Then I'll stain it, and then I can come back and make any extra corrections that might need to be made with my blend all sticks. I like to come back with a tool and just create some little ridges in my wood putty to make it kind of look like wood grain, so it doesn't look like a big patch of putty. I had a deep gouge that I'm just going to steam out with my steam iron. It'll kind of lift the wood grains and the wood fibers and try to help fill out that area. Once the stripper was ready, I'm going to scrape the doors. I'm using the same method. I start with my carbide scraper. I take the residue off with some paper towels. Then I'll come back with some acetone and 2/0 steel wool to get the rest of the residue off. Here's a few more areas I'm just going to put in the little hashes. See how it kind of mimics the wood grain? So it's just these fine little things that kind of help just blend in some of your repairs. This is the door that had so much damage. I'm smoothing out all of the wood fill, but honestly, it doesn't look great. I'm going to have to recover it. So I have some veneer that I'm going to adhere with wood glue. So I'm going to do a dry fit, just going to trim it to the size. And honestly, there's another side that isn't looking so good either. So I'm going to attach some veneer to the middle part and then to the trim on the right as well. I'm mainly lining it up on one side, and then I'm going to have a little bit of overhang on the other side. So I'm not trying to be super precise because I'm just going to glue it down, and then I will trim it with a razor blade, and then I'll sand the edges after that. I'm ready to glue everything up, and they were going really good until my lid came off my glue. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I just went ahead and used it. I got my chip brush and I'm just spreading it out over the area that needs to be spread out. I wish I had cleaned it up better. You'll see there's just some areas that I end up having drips, caused myself probably an extra 30 minutes worth of work because I had some glue that ended up glopping up underneath my veneer on the overhang. So sometimes things happen, and I should have been a little bit more precise when I was doing it, but mistakes happen. This is paper-backed veneer, and per the company, you're just supposed to use either Titebond 2 or 3, and so I'm using Titebond 2 wood glue, and so this is what you want to use when you're adhering it. You use glue on both sides, then you're supposed to just adhere it, weight it down, clamp it down, and let it dry. Now, I'll be honest, I made another mistake. I was in a hurry. This was at the end of the day. I needed to go in and make dinner. So I simply clamped it up, and I forgot a crucial part that I always do, is I always put something over it before I clamp it up because I don't want to make sure that my piece of veneer isn't going to stick to the wood. Well, I didn't do that. So it was probably 11 or 12 o'clock when I realized what I had done. And I was like, I can't go out to the garage now. It's already done. So I'll just deal with it in the morning. And sure enough, one of the pieces came off great, and the other piece, I had to hammer it off. And so it came off, took a little bit of the veneer with it that I ended up having to fill in. So when you're putting your weights down, make sure you put something over it, like a piece of wax paper, a piece of aluminum foil, something as a barrier. I usually use painter's tape, but you see I'm having to hammer it off. It literally glued to my piece of wood. I couldn't believe it. Well, I can believe it, but I was super disappointed in myself. But it's okay. It ended up working. So now I'm ready to razor blade off all of the excess. I can see I had a lot of excess on the side there, but I couldn't see all those glue drips underneath. This is not a very good job, let me just tell you. But I created probably, like I said, an extra 30 minutes worth of work for myself because I had to get all of these glue drops up. So learn from my mistake. Don't do it like this. Be a little bit more precise and don't be in a hurry. See, I was in a hurry because it was the end of the day. I just wanted to get it glued up so it could kind of adhere, cure overnight. So don't be in a hurry when you're doing this. So now I'm using my razor blade and I'm trimming the excess. I'll trim the excess as close to the side as I can, and then I'll be able to sand it, and that'll sand it smooth to the edge of the piece. Now I'm ready for stain. I'm going to do a slip coat of mineral spirits. I like to use that first. It just helps the gel stain kind of glide across the surface. I'm using Varathane gel stain in the color Hickory. It's a beautiful deep brown. Because this piece was painted, I felt like I needed to go a little bit darker just to make sure that I cover any imperfections that you might have on the piece. I mean, I got as much paint out as possible, but there's still tiny little bits here and there. So I think the gel stain will be nice and forgiving because of where I started on this piece. So I still have some more repairs I'm making on a few of the doors. There's just a lot of moving pieces. So like just this little piece right here, this is some glue that I had on that veneer, and it just takes time. If you don't get that glue off, then your stain won't adhere. So I had to use my scraper and sandpaper and then check it with mineral spirits to make sure I got all of that glue off. So you have to really do your due diligence to make sure that that glue is off. Like I said, take your time, make sure that all that glue is off before you walk away for the day. I had a little area at the top of my new veneer that didn't quite go up to the top. So I'm just going to fill that in with a little bit more of the wood epoxy. Now I'm ready to do the back side of the doors. I'm going to do the same protocol. I sand with 80, then I sand with 120, and then I'll stop at 180, and then I'll be ready to do the same staining process on those as well. You can see how rich that color is. This is a beautiful color. Now I'm ready to do some of my corrections. I'm using Mohawk Splendol sticks. I like to start light, put a little bit on. These are waxy sticks, so you're just kind of mimicking the wood grain. So I just put a little bit on, wipe it. The heat from my fingers just kind of help blend it all in. And then once you're happy with it, you're going to spray it with their Easy Vinyl Sealer or a lacquer. Make sure that you seal it because it is a wax. And once that's dried, I'm ready to move on to sealing. I'm using Osmo's hard wax oil. I'm using a white abrasive to apply it. You just simply wipe it on and then you wipe off the excess. I like to put at least 2 coats on, sometimes 3 on the top. You have to let it dry for about 8 to 10 hours in between coats. So I'll just let it dry overnight and then I'll come back and do another coat the next day. Now on the top of one of them, I noticed it was not taking the gel stain in a few areas. So sometimes you don't know what kind of contaminants are in the wood. So I decided I'm just going to strip it. So I tried to put some more gel stain over it, didn't work. So I'm just going to strip the whole top. The rest of it looks great, but I'll strip the top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to seal that stain with some shellac. Shellac is really good at sealing in any kind of tannins, odors, contaminants, and it plays nicely with oil-based stains, so I'll be fine. While that dries, I'll put my first coat of oil on the doors. Now, I had one area that I went against the grain when I was sanding, and so that doesn't look good when you stain it. So you need to stop what you're doing, like I am here, and I'm going back and I'm using 80 grit and I'm sanding out that entire area. I had that big long scratch on it. You don't want that. So if you see any imperfections at this point, just stop, sand it out, and then come back and stain it. If you have any sanding swirls, anything like this, make sure you correct it before you move on. And now it looks better. Once the shellac dried, I gave it a quick scuff sand and then I restained it. And that did the trick. Now I'm ready to reattach the doors. I'm using my electric screwdriver. After the hard wax oil dried, you could still see the variations where I replaced the veneer. And one of the tops was a little bit lighter than the other one. So I really feel like I can do better. You can see in different tones, different lights, it looks okay, but I can do better. So I grabbed Mohawk's toner. This is medium brown, and I'm gonna just tone those areas, and it looked really good. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna do the whole front because there's a lot of variations in those woods on the front. So I did both fronts, and then I did the top on one of them just to try to darken it up a little. Once that dried, I sealed it with some lacquer. And this is what they look like. I was not a fan of the gloss. Too many variations going on. So this time I'm going to use a flat. I'm going to load up my little siphon gun. It's attached to my small air compressor. Your last coat determines what your sheen is. And so this is a flat, and I think it'll look much better with all of the tones that I have going on. Well, let's look back at the before. Man, this was a lot, this project. I wish I had been able to find them before they had been painted. It would have been so much easier. But you remember all that damage I had in that door? And I think I made it better after the problem with the glue. But man, so much work on the sanding. You know, the doors, I think I underestimated how difficult they were going to be to sand because, I didn't know the direction of the grain because the paint was covering it up. So I just didn't realize it was going to be so tedious and trying to get all of that paint out. The paint really settled into the thickness of the grain. So after all those repairs, a lot of sanding, a lot of acetone, here is the finished product. What do you think? I think the matte finish is what makes it for me. I think that the glossy finish kind of accentuated all of the different things going on. They definitely needed to be toned. Here's the door that I had to replace the veneer on. I think it blends in really well. So many little repairs. This top is still a little bit lighter than the other one, but I'm okay with it. It's close enough, and they're not going to be next to each other anyway. So I love them. I think, I'm not going for a full restoration to where it was supposed to be because someone thought it was supposed to be a glossy finish. But I personally think the matte does better for this particular piece based on where it started with all of the paint and just the varying wood tones. I think the matte makes it really beautiful for today's modern home. So what do you think? Do you like them? What do you think I should list them for? I'm seeing them on Etsy for about $1,500 a piece. I don't know what I should ask for it. So tell me in the comments what you think. Do you like the finish? How much should I ask? Thanks so much for watching.